Hello and welcome back, everybody. With Joe and I were talking a moment ago about various things, including immunotherapy, and he mentioned the word registry. Now, I was a teacher and I kept a register, and that was just a list where I was to tick students who had arrived and cross the students who hadn't shown up. But Joe, you don't mean this, and you have a lovely PowerPoint for us as well. So could you explain to us what you mean by registry?
I'd be delighted to. So, I mean, it's not dissimilar with idea, the registry you had in your class, but this is just including more data on people who we would then be able to follow over time. And I'll explain a bit more about that, including, how the data is dealt with. So before I start, so this is the Prospective Ocular Melanoma Natural History Study. We've given it a fancy name to give it an acronym that people will recognize, because that's important, you see. But this has been developed through the Uveal Melanoma International Rare Cancer Initiative, which is led by Richard Carvajal at Columbia, and also through Anthony Joshua in Australia and myself here in the UK. And really, we're trying to develop something internationally to help move the field forward, to get better treatments. We talked earlier about how small trials are and the lack of evidence for many of these treatments. And we want to get better trials. We want to get as many as possible, but can we get any other data that will support that? And this is where the registry really fits in. So we know that there are lots of risk factors there are lots of gaps in our understanding with uveal melanoma that we would like to be able to address. The risk factors of why it comes back in some people and others, we know a lot about that, but we don't fully know the answer to that. And then risk stratification, how we can adjust different treatment options, etc. How we do surveillance to detect liver metastases, to get better evidence, to find the right way, and then also to convince everybody to do it the same way ultimately. And then also, what treatments we have when it has come back, ultimately, liver-directed or systemic therapies. And these gaps, we hope that we can address them through, at least in part, with the registry. So there's a lot of text here, and I'll skim through that, partly because you can't see the top right-hand corner with the way this is set up. But basically, we want to look at documenting clinical outcomes. So when we get a lot of data about people having treatment, including risk factors such as their genetics and so on, and then what has happened when the cancer came back, what treatments they had, etc., so that we can then say that this is what normally happens after development of metastases. These are the treatments, effects of these treatments. And then we can not only use that to understand current treatments, but provide a sort of a comparison for new treatments that are coming onto the market and that we'll be able to assess. There are also things around, as I said, radiographic surveillance and so on. So, ultrasound versus MRI versus CT versus PET versus blood test. We have lots of different bits of information. And I personally tried to get a clinical trial that would address this head on, but it just proved very difficult to get funding. The timelines were incredibly long. So can we actually use what's happening with people? So everybody's doing it slightly differently. If we can we compare what happens with people in different situations? And then also, we talked earlier about how science is really moving on and helping us understand the cancer so that we can then address it better, find new treatments. So we would look to develop a virtual uveal melanoma tumor repository. So that means that people would gift their access to their tumors that had been taken out or biopsied or whatever, and would consent through this process when they go onto the registry. And then if somebody wants to ask a specific question, we'd be able to link up those biopsy samples to then assay them. And hopefully we can really find out more stuff about tumor biology and facilitate drug development. So this is, I guess it's called an organogram. It's how it's structured. So we have a steering committee with myself, Rich, and Anthony, And then we'll have administrative scientific advisory boards. We've got funding initially from Immunocore, but we will be looking at new funding streams as we go on. And then we're using a data platform called Pulse InfoFrame, which will be collecting the data. And in each of the countries, we have then national committees and then recruiting centers. Now, we've only got a relatively small number of centers who would be on this, partly because of cost initially and with the logistics of setting it up. But hopefully, as we go forward, we will be able to expand on that as well. It's taken a long time to get to this point, but really we now have a database live and built, and Colombia has started entering patient data. It's open, we hope to open UK and Australian hubs, so the main centers here and in Australia, by the end of this year or early next year, and then the subsequent sites. So this is what, you know, the Pulse InfoFrame looks like, and this will just be a summary that you have, you know, this number, 100 odd patients in Colombia that have been consented and have had data entered onto the system. And then would be following on, you know, what happened over treatment, the drug therapies, etc., that were given. Our intention is to have about 400 patients recruited onto the registry every year. And we're medical oncologists predominantly, and our first question is really around the management of disease that has spread, so stage 4. So that's what we'll be looking at first, but we would ultimately want to recruit everybody and understand the earlier stages of the cancer as well. We will look to have continual recruitment and long-term follow-up. You know, I would imagine that we would be doing this for forever if we can, because we need to keep on in an iterative process, understanding the disease, understanding our therapies, and then being able to improve upon that. But our funding is currently for 2 years, so it will be vital to secure ongoing funding. We are trying to use as many data sets as possible to back this up. So we're looking at the PUMA meta-analysis. This was run by one of our investigators, Anthony Joshua. He led it and basically pulled together data from a lot of different studies to understand, you know, outcomes. And we'll add this to the registry. But then we're also looking to secure further funding from other companies, but also from academic institutions, such as through the US government have a call out that we're looking at the moment. If we get more funding, we also want to expand the number of sites we have, so we can get more data. And we're also looking to integrate and crosstalk with other registries. You may have heard of the MRF QRM registry, and we'd like to link to this so that we can get patient-reported data as well as that which comes through the institutions themselves. In addition, Ocular Insight is another patient-based registry in the US, which we would look to collaborate with. And for example, there's a national registry in in France, and there's the COG2 one in the US, which is run by Bill Harbour. So if we can, basically we can tie together all this data, we can learn as much as possible. And what happens to the information? So really what we're looking is that this is anonymized at site. If somebody is says yes to, consents to the study, then the data that would be taken from that would be anonymized. So it would be entered with an ID and minimal information. It wouldn't be traceable back to the person themselves. It would then be aggregated to be used to understand these questions. The data would be retained by the hospital so that able to say, we've had so many people having treatment over this period of time, etc. So it'd be useful for in every hospital themselves. But then the more aggregated data would be shared with the investigators. We will be looking at, we have clear publication policies and will reflect contribution towards the registry. Although Immunocore have provided funding, they will not own the data or determine publication to say you can only publish this because it makes our drug look good or whatever. And I don't believe that would be in their best interests anyway. but we will allow them access to support regulatory submissions. So really what we want drug companies to be successful in developing drugs that can be used by patients. And the same way we would be open to providing this data to other pharmaceutical companies. And really, we would like also them to then contribute towards the running of the registry so that we can keep it going on long term. And that's basically what it is. So hopefully, because we don't have lots of big trials, we can basically back up the data that we're getting on trials with this registry real world data that we can then we can lead to better treatments in future.
Thank you, Joe. That was really interesting. I must confess, when you first mentioned the word registry, my first question was, who owns it? And who's going to find out about me? And I think that's everybody's normal go-to fear. But it sounds like you've already thought about putting in, shall we call them safety procedures, to ensure that the data is really about cure and not about knowledge about me.
Yeah, no, I think that's very fair. To be fair, it's going to be a lot, this will be compared to what you do on your phone and tell Google and so on. This will be nothing like that, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, yeah.
Really, it is all about understanding, I guess the sort of data would be the person was 48, female, male, this was the size of the tumor. It's not about where did you live, what insurance policies, anything like that. That's not what I'm interested in. And it's the same sort of data that would be collected in a clinical trial. It's just that it would be used more widely to hopefully support not one clinical trial, one drug, but all of the drugs that are being investigated.
I can't see how it can't be helpful. So I'm wishing you all the luck that this goes forwards. And I'm going to thank you so much for helping us out today and with your talk. And it is really, really interesting. And I'm sure that everybody who listens into this will benefit from it.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye for now.